You brought something too, didn't you?
I sure did. So today, Chris, I brought you an article for us to talk about. We're going to go over that. It's about time management, of course.
And I have lots of thoughts on that.
Talking nerdy. We're just talking nerdy. With all this talking nerdy. Oh, come on, you wanna talk nerdy?
So, one of my colleagues shared this article at work about how to get better at managing your time. It's called the 888 rule. And the article is on LinkedIn by M. Usman. They only give a first letter for their first name. And the title is What is the 8 plus 8 plus 8 rule and how can it help you achieve balance in your life? And Chris, you haven't heard of this yet, have you?
I haven't heard of the 8 by 8 by 8 rule. No, it sounds a little gimmicky. So I'm curious to see whether or not you where we land on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna quickly give everyone a brief summary directly from the article here.
I'll
What
share
is
the
the
article on the screen actually.
Okay, yeah, great.
Yeah,
What
so
is
people can
the
see it.
8 plus 8 plus 8 rule? This is a time management technique that helps you distribute your day into 3 equal parts: 8 hours of honest hard work, 8 hours of good sleep, and 8 hours of leisure activities. The idea behind this rule is that by allocating your time wisely, you can optimize your productivity, health, and well being. And then it goes on to go into further explanation around hard work means don't procrastinate, no distractions, and avoid unnecessary stress. The 8 hours of good sleep means make it routine, regular, avoid caffeine, alcohol, and screens before bed. And then leisure activities goes on to talk about how you want to choose activities that are beneficial for your growth and well being. You should divide your leisure time into 3 categories, which we will get into in a bit. But before we do that, I what do you think just based on that description?
I think this is bullshit.
Yeah, thought so.
You knew I would probably say that, which is why you're bringing it. You're like, I bet you Chris is going to hate this.
Chris is going to hate it, and I have some thoughts, and I'd love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, well, I just don't particularly. I mean, I have lots of thoughts just on the idea of 8 8 8 8. I mean, it, what it's inherently saying is that balance is good. And I think that's actually not true. If I were going to look at it, and I actually have read a couple of books about this, but one of the ones I would say that's great is by Matthew Kelly called Off Balance. And he makes a great argument about how anyone who has pretty much an epic life never didn't live with a balanced life. Like the idea of having everything being like, oh, I worked 8 hours this day. I had 8 hours of good sleep and I had 8 hours of leisure activity. That sounds real nice and it's like perfect. But this is very much like this sounds like mid philosophy. Philosophy. Do you know what I mean by mid philosophy?
No,
Have you? Or,
mid? Can you spell
yeah.
that?
It's just
MID?
am I just mids? Mids are. It's a very popular term online referring to people who are just like mids. You know, like they're just not. They're not tops. They're not bottoms. Just mids. Basic, average, that kind of thing. This feels like mid philosophy to me. And I don't particularly like that kind of stuff because that's not the formula for success. I mean, most of the people who become entrepreneurs, I wouldn't want to sugarcoat the idea of like, oh, yeah, you can build a business with just some like 8 hours of hard work a day. And then you get your full 8 hours of sleep. And then you get like, this is for people who are working a job, right? This is like, go to job 8 hours, great, I can check out and I have 8 hours of leisure activity, so I can do that and then I get to sleep. That is not how an entrepreneur thinks or is successful. It just isn't. Like I remember being an entrepreneur when I started and working, you know, 10 to 12 hour days, sometimes longer, depending on the day, and then back at it the next day to build this thing. And I'm not talking, and sometimes at least 6 days a week, but sometimes seven. Like it really is that level of effort sometimes that it takes to get momentum and move things forward. Uh, and you're not living balanced. You're doing that as an investment for your future so that you get the leisure time that's like 10 hours a day on certain days. You know what I mean? Like, or you can take whole months off if you want to. Like, that's what it takes to live balanced. And we don't want balance either, right? Like,
I
it just,
agree. I agree with one of the big premises you are saying, which is it's not going to work for everybody. And the entrepreneurial life is very hardworking, not just 8 hours a day. And that this is very much for people who have the JOB. Absolutely agree on that.
it's results based instead of being focused on time based. Like I already hate this because it's time based. Like if you're an entrepreneur, you're not you're not focused on time, you're focused on results, which is why people work so hard or put in extra time and effort, and they work till midnight on certain days because they've got to get certain things done so they hit the timing right, or they have clients waiting, or they have to pay rent the next day. So if they don't get this thing closed or this deal solidified, they're going out of business. And so I don't like this. I think this is, again, like mid philosophy. If you want to live mid, it's like average. I don't think that's for people who want to be an entrepreneur.
One of the things that I pulled up for this article that I wasn't a huge fan of, it's actually quite different from what you are
Yeah,
saying.
you haven't even said, like, you brought this. Did you just bring it for us to shit on this? Because, like, do you like this
No,
or do you
there's
hate
some
this?
stuff in here that I actually appreciate. But first, I want to say what I don't like about this is that working hard nonstop for 8 hours is actually not realistic, because for people who have a job, you've got this transit time to and from your job. You've also got your lunch hour, which I really despise the idea of a lunch hour set at a specific time and ending at a specific time. That drives me nuts. And so that's the one thing. That's about the 8 hours of hard work. That's not really realistic. And then the sleep schedule of 8 hours, like, it's imperfect. It's kind of interesting that you talk about the imbalances of epic life, because sleep is an excellent example of imbalance. It's rarely routine. It's rarely at the same time of the day, ending and then waking up at the same time of the day. It fluctuates so much. And then the quality of sleep varies a lot as well. And then the other thing is, for people who have day jobs and who have side projects, the side project kind of counts as work. It doesn't necessarily count as leisure in my book. So in that case, you've got 8+ hours of work, and then you come home and you do a side hustle that's eight, or not eight more, but like it's another few hours of work during the week. This doesn't account for that. So to your credit of what you're saying, where this is a great thing for mids. I'm not a fan of that term. I already don't like it, but
Oh,
you're the
I
first time I'm
looked
hearing
it up. This is mid is a slang term used to describe something or someone as mediocre or of low quality. So yeah, it's not super nice.
It's low quality, even though it's mid.
Yeah, mid. That's
It
because I
sounds a
think
lot more like a threesome sex position thing that I don't understand.
it's mediocre, man. That's all it means, is mediocre. And I just say that mediocre is the average and the standard.
Yeah.
Right. And so where does our life change? Our life changes when we change our standards. And I mean, here's the thing, like, some people are great employees and they're meant to be employees. I don't think everybody should be an entrepreneur, but you're listening to the Nerdpreneur podcast. So I don't think that's not the message we're putting out there to the world. And if you happen to be listening to this and you're in 8 hours a day and you have your 8 hours after, like, I don't want to say like, oh, you're living poorly, because this is the thing. Like, I've gone through portions of my life where I've had that nice balance and it's been nice. But for me, I often wind up needing that extra, like, oomph. Like, I want to put my energy like into other things and build something bigger so that I get something bigger down the road. Like, I like creating things in the world. That's sort of the entrepreneur
Right.
journey. And so for people who want to do that, they have to have that drive and that passion. And it doesn't mean that you all have to go the route I did, working 12 hours a day for 7 days a week either, because you can do a lot of things stupidly for 10 or 12 hours a day and not make much progress, which I did. Like, I will say, going back, if I'd have known better and worked smarter, I probably could have got a lot further than I ever thought, and a lot faster. But like, there's people like Eminem. Eminem treats rapping like a job now. And it's funny because, like, if he's notorious for this, if you work with him, he goes into the studio 9 a.m. He leaves at 5. He leaves right at 5. Like, it's nothing beyond that. And he works till then. And if somebody's coming in, showing up at the studio late, he's like, well, I'm gone. Too bad. Like, he doesn't care who's there. He doesn't. I mean, but he's also
Work-life
worked his butt
boundaries,
off.
baby.
Yeah. So, but he's also worked his ass off to get to that point where he can be the guy who's just like, this is what I do for my music career is a job, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. That's how I work. That's what I do. And you know what? Like, that's sort of an earned position once you get there, right? If you've qualified for a job for that way, or you've, got to the point as an entrepreneur where that's the boundaries you get to set because you've built something big enough and you have the lifestyle and you can fund everything that you want, and you have the positioning in the market, all those other things. It kind of allows you to have that ideal balance if that's what you want. But that's not how he started. He started from the ground up. He had to work his ass off to get really, really good, to be the best, rapper he possibly could be, and then work and hustle his way all the way up to be recognized as that. And now he's able to have that work-life balance.
So, two things. First off, not a huge fan of the term mid because of the fact that its definition is that they are low quality people, when in fact the word is derived from middle, mediocre, meaning average. So, therefore, it's actually not low quality because low quality is the lower end of the bell curve. And then average is just the bulk of people in the belly of the bell curve. So, that's the first thing. Not a fan of the term. I don't think it's accurate, and I think it's demeaning to people who are in the average. And yes, of course, I feel a little bit attacked because every now and then I feel average. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is I'm not a huge fan of the idea, or I'm wary of the danger of us putting in so many hours now. I know that there is a purpose to it. I get it. Don't get me wrong. But I also want to point out this kind of like thing that bothers me, or at least something to be considered, is how do you then stop that to enjoy the time with loved ones? Because you said you put all that energy in now, you hustle so that you can relax later. But the problem is, by that time, you've probably created a self identity around this hard work, or you've created a routine around it, and people expect that of you. The people that report to you expect you to work 10-hour days. They expect you to sacrifice sleep, family time, personal health so that you'll get shit done. How do you then create those boundaries?
Well,
Where
again,
do you put, when do you put up the boundaries?
I think you're thinking like a mid here. So,
Screw you, Chris.
And this is why. All right, this is why. No, I'm telling you this because you, even the way you phrase that, though, it does indicate sort of a way of thinking to me, which is, if you're putting in this many hours, people expect this many hours. That's not just not how it goes. People, as you grow, expect similar results. So results are actually the name of the game, right? And so that can be in the form of sales, or it can be in the form which is very tangible and measurable and easy to be like, okay, you're hitting it or you're not. That's why I bring that up first. But it could also just be in terms of, you're a receptionist and you're, answering the phones and directing calls at the right places, and then showing up and doing all the things that are necessary, funneling the right leads to the right person. Or it could be a doctor actually saving lives, and healing people, right? He doesn't just put in 8 hours. He has to do a good job at that and get results for the people. So, I just think that there has to be, in success, we have to get off that idea of time is the big factor. And the way this 8x8 is breaking things down, it's just based on like, it's implying the idea that like, well, at the end of 8 hours, if I'm a doctor, for example, and this patient is still not done surgery, I guess I could just check out or whatever. Like, it just sort of implies silly thoughts and obvious. To me, it just seems like a way for people to look at this and be able to say, well, I'm already doing that. I check out at the end of the day and don't really care. I put in my 8 hours. But what did you do with those 8 hours?
So you're saying it's less the focus on time put in, it's more the focus of throughput.
Yeah, like I don't generally focus on the time. There are weeks of the year that I work very hard. I put in 12-hour days still. But that's because my job is still heavily based on certain results because of the format of the way it works, right? Like in this. And same with, this podcast. Like, there are some weeks where we'll put in a heck of a lot more time into doing this because we have a lot to get done, or it's a big promotion, or there's something that has to happen right now because of timing with the industry. Like, there's more time put in because of the intention of results, but that's because we want to get the result. It's not about the time. The
So
time is just a byproduct of getting the result.
So it sounds like there's an assumption here that I want to put into the spotlight, which is as we continue to do something for a long period of time, we put in many hours, eventually we will be able to do the same throughput in less time. So then there is this assumption that we will become more efficient. Whereas with an anecdote from my own personal life, my mother started a skincare line. She's a dermatologist, retired dermatologist, and she started a skincare line from a position of authority. And she had a lot of good things going for her in her business, but she did it for about 20, 25 years building this brand. And as time went on, she continued to put the same amount of time in until she eventually she was forced to retire. And when she was forced to retire, she stopped completely, cold turkey. But leading up to that point, from my perspective, and having assisted her company at times, I would argue that she got less efficient as time went on with her own time, but she got more efficient at having less people on her team. So there was this interesting trade that happened, and I bring this up as it's not always black and white. It's not always you get more efficient at what you're doing. It's sometimes you surround yourself with the people that do work well. You learn to surround yourself with the right people. You learn where to actually put your focus because it provides you the most return. Greatest ROI. And whether it's sales or dollars or connections or whatever your metric of success is. And I think it's interesting that it takes the shape, it takes different shapes for different people, this type of efficiency. And bringing it back to this article, yes, I agree with you. I'm not a fan of it, but there were a couple things I did like in it. And
Okay.
talking about those for a second, yes, it's not a great article. I don't like it's a fine
What do
article.
you like though? Like is it in the 8x8x8, or is there more to this thing?
There's more to it.
Okay. What are
I like that. Well, first off, I'm not a huge fan of these kind of things in general, which is one of the reasons I brought it up. I was like, I'm not a huge fan of these, like, we're going to solve everything with an article kind of thing. That bugs me. And I knew you would also dislike it. So that's why I wanted to throw it to you. But as far as this article itself, there are some granules in here that are kind of nice. For me, around work, I really do enjoy the idea, this reminder of maintaining a more focused time when I'm working. The beginning of this year, after having some vacation during the holidays, I came back to my day job, which is a very entrepreneurial position of launching our visual marketing services. And I have this newfound focus of what I want to do, and my time has been spent better. And I feel like I'm creating more output. And I want to know with you how you tend to get more focused, how you cultivate more focused time. For me, it comes down to less accessibility to my own phone. I now, keep social media and my phone at, more than arm's length. And I am on social media less than 5 minutes a day often. And sometimes not at all in a day.
Yeah, well, I noticed that because I send you stuff and you don't respond, which is great because I actually think that's smart.
Thanks.
There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things in what you just said, and especially in regards to it's not with your mom. It's not a straight line. Like people's priorities might have been around, yes, increasing profitability by relieving expenses, like getting rid of people or annoyances of dealing with people by taking on other things and being more efficient with them yourself. Like it is complicated. It is. However, I think that there's a lot of things. There's a lot that we can learn in terms of capacity. Is kind of the other thing that I wanted to bring up in this is that what I hate about this article is that it doesn't factor in the idea of capacity. It just says, well, everybody's good for 8 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 8 hours a day. Like that's your capacity. And there are some people that it if you have capacity, you can get so much more done in 8 hours than other people. And I challenge everybody listening to this that if you're feeling busy, overwhelmed, stressed, and agitated at your schedule, that you're in a growth period, not that you've reached your edge. And that there's probably some techniques or things that we can talk about, because I have quite a bit. I actually have a bunch of stuff to say about how to be more smart with our time and get more done, be more productive. But you look at who's the guy who ran Apple?
Jobs?
Yeah,
Steve
Steve
Jobs?
Jobs. He ran a $1 billion corporation called Apple, but also at the same time, he had another $1 billion corporation he was running at the same time called Pixar.
Pixar? Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I win.
And
I
so
got it.
when you have two like $1 billion corporations running at the same time and you're the head of both of them, do you think he had some capacity, right? And the reality is that most of us are not even close to the level of capacity that we could have. And so I question, if you're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, like you have no time, you have a capacity issue, not a a stress issue or a time issue. It's usually to do with working smarter and stretching yourself to be better in the core areas that you need to be better at. So there's a lot of things in that I want to go into more details and nitty gritty stuff on it, and actually like get into the 6 things that actually help you manage your time, that kind of, because I have some of those.
Well,
But
maybe you can, as it addresses the question of how do you cultivate more focused work time?
well, this is it, right? Like I want to explain. I want to talk about a few different things, but let's talk about like reactivity versus proactivity. Do you know what I mean by those two things as far as reactivity and proactivity?
Yeah, well, at least the way I think of them is reactive is as things pop up, you're reacting to it, whereas proactive is you tend to strategize and plan in advance a little more. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like reactivity is like, okay, this doesn't happen as much anymore because we just don't have as many people working in offices. But when I ran an office, all right, I'll give an example. When I ran an office and I had a lot of sales reps and receptionists and employees and people like that coming in, and I was responsible for a lot of things. So what happens is you get people coming in and they just like, oh, have you got a minute? I got this thing that's coming up. I got to talk to you about. Oh, have you got a minute? Can I talk to you about this thing? Or oh, hey, this situation just came up, or hey, there's this thing that's just arrived. I need you to sign for, like, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense? Like, these are constantly little flies that are taking your attention away and creating reactivity instead of what we want to be doing with our time is being proactive with it. And if you can focus, and if you have all these distractions that are causing us to become reactive, then it takes away from the ability to be proactive in our time. And proactive is actually where we don't stress, right? So being proactive is where we're anticipating things, we're thinking ahead, and we're on top of it before it ever becomes, say, an urgent or desperate situation that has to be handled. So I just like to cover that as a principle to start off, is that we want to live in proactivity, not reactivity for things. And the other thing is that as you grow an organization, you realize that there are many core areas that really are causing impact. So as you go through this organization, like in mine, there was sales, obviously was a big one because it was a sales organization, and without that it was straight commission. So if we didn't have those coming in, we were all out of a business. So sales is number one, right? But there was also, there were recruiting stats, right? And that was on my side, the managerial interviewing and training and developing people. And then there was also stats in terms of the receptionist statistics, so bringing people to the interview and running ads and getting people interested in the job, right?
Can you?
And
I
things
want to.
like
I
that.
want to interject. Can you give an example? I feel like there's a good example opportunity in reactive versus proactive regarding recruitment. How did you tend to conduct your interviews? Like, did you do them if people emailed you out of the blue? Did you say come on in tomorrow, or did you hold something on a quarterly basis so people knew?
It's tough to explain because it was a recruiting business. We wanted you to come in that day. So it was like if you emailed in the morning and we saw your application, we were like, hey, we have an interview in 4 hours. Can you make it to the office? We've got a lot of spots. We only have a few spots left, but I can squeeze you in. So we would use urgency to get people in as quickly as possible.
But would you, because to me, that sounds reactive rather than, hey, that's great, you're interested. Because in my mind, I would think proactive is, hey, we do interviews at the start of every quarter. So, we've got your resume and we will reach out again around that time.
There are reactive jobs. You're right. I mean, there's lots of jobs that are reactive out there, like a receptionist handling calls and funneling leads, or even a salesperson who's managing things like, I know, people calling in, or a customer service agent. But you still should be proactive in those roles so that you're the most ready when they come in and all your strategies. So we would run now this is where I was talking about like the key impact areas. There were certain efficiencies that had to happen for our receptionists to get people to the office. Like we had, for example, a same day scheduling percentage, and we wanted that to be 30%. 30% of the people that they talk to that day, we want them scheduled same day interview, and that's something where we're being proactive about the intentions around what are the keys to getting people in same day. There are techniques we can train and study and be able to do that. So even when you're reactive, you're being proactive to be able to hit certain key result areas. And so what I'm saying is that then you're ready, right? That's mostly what it's about. So yes, there are reactive jobs. You can't not all jobs are proactive, but I think as an entrepreneur, we want to live in proactivity. And yes, you're going to have some people who ideally are, working for you doing the reactive positions, but you've proactively built those positions to be a certain efficiency. Does that make sense?
I'd even add that there's a proactive element, even in the example that I kind of offered and you elaborated on. There is still a proactiveness to the reactive nature of it, which you were saying, and I just want to say it another way, which is if you create a standard operating procedure, if you create a process for when those reactive scenarios happen, that's being proactive. And I think for entrepreneurs, it's nice to realize that if you wanted to live in that proactive space, as we are saying, it's best to be in, there's always going to be a reactive element. And I also think there's very much a reactive, there's react reactive phases are part of the learning process. Like for me, when I manage this visual marketing services, there are always new situations. Almost every week, I have a new situation I have to react to, but then I'm creating a process around it so that the next time it comes up and I need to quote someone for that specific kind of project, oh, I've got a sample or a template for what I would charge and what I need to do. I know how long it'll take. I mean, today, for example, someone asked, hey, how long would this video take? Here's a script. How long would the video be? They said. And that's kind of like telling the future. It's like reading the clouds and saying, you've got a script and sure, that'll take this long. But I've gotten a science at this point where on average, every 3 words equals 1 second of video. Now, that's assuming that there's words throughout the entire video. And because of that, knowing that, I was able to provide that information readily to the client.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're hitting it on the head there, where you are being proactive in order to be the most efficient reactive you can be, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is I want to get off proactivity and reactivity because we said those two words so many times. And I feel it's just
I think we could fit it in another 10 times. That's okay, right?
But I like that as a principle just to understand, because reactivity is what causes lack of efficiency usually. So, for example, what's the biggest reactive thing in our lives right now?
Going to the bathroom.
Okay, no, but the phone. I would challenge the phone is probably even more reactive, because you're going to wind up, we have constant device interruptions. Constant, right?
Yes.
And so the idea of breaking our patterns, right, and getting us to pay attention to this little device we hold on to, that's a big part of the problem nowadays in efficiency, is being able to manage those things. And so, just there are techniques like my default is no notifications, right? Like there are only very few people or apps that are allowed to send me any notification. And if I find an app sending me a notification that I'm like, why are you sending me? I turn it off immediately. And so I control my attention as best I can so that I don't get interrupted at times when I have to do that steady, focused work. So, and this includes friends, this includes family, this includes, I mean, pretty much anybody. If I need to get focused work done, I turn off notifications and put the phone somewhere else and then get to what I need to do. Because it's like, if, and there's been studies on this, and I think it's like, if you get interrupted at any point, it can take 45 minutes to get back to refocusing. Like it can be to the same level of focus you had before.
I've
And
heard
if
that
that happens,
before too. And I think it's total, at least for me, that it's total BS. Like I can get focused back in 5 minutes, less probably.
oh, I don't know. I think that maybe
I'm
that's
just
from
a
a
mid.
long
I'm
time
just
ago.
a mid, so I don't
I've
really
heard
know
that.
what the fuck this statistic really is saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Who am I?
Well, no, I don't know, but here's what I mean. I wanted to get into knowing impact areas. That's actually where I wanted to take this conversation more, is because the thing is, if you're running an organization, you have to look at what are the key result areas. And I was talking about all the different areas. That's how we got into the discussion of like my receptionist, for example, but they were a key result area. There was also my development candidates, people I was developing to run offices. And then there was my current staff. They were key result areas, right? So all of these different places that I had to be responsible for, but I'm just one person. So what's important, I think, is, and this is actually, I'm stealing a lot of this from a really, really amazing place. There is a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. And the first chapter is about time management. And it's great because it's the shortest chapter, and time management should be quick.
That's
the
great.
thing,
The chapter is short then.
the thing I hate, I do kind of hate the idea of, like, I don't know if you've ever been to time management workshops where they're like,
No.
hey, or if you've ever had someone teach you time management and try to be like, oh, all you have to do is measure what you're doing for like 2 months and look at everything and find where you're losing your time. And it's like, if I had time to do that, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be asking you for help. It's stupid.
That's interesting because I did in project management classes as part of business school. I mean, I honestly freaking loved project management classes because of structure. I mean, you know me. Give me structure any day of the week, baby. And that was so good to help me see with like a Gantt chart, for example, of like, okay, this is how I do my hours. This is how I can stretch my projects. And if I don't meet that expected duration, or if it exceeds it, there's that says varying things. So yes, tracking it, I know, feels like it's the opposite of what you want to do, but it helped me determine how long tasks would take. So it helped me tell the future in a way. So that's my little plug for tracking your tasks. It's good.
And for those of you that aren't like that, I'm going to teach you how to actually be successful without that. Because it's definitely a personality type. And if all the business people in business school were actually successful in business, we would have an incredible economy. But unfortunately, that's just not how. Business school is not usually the best place to learn all the best things about business, in my opinion. I took theater school though, so what the heck do I know? So the thing is, the first thing, key result areas, right? So you have different areas. You should definitely have a meeting at least once a week where you, especially when you're working with other people or you have organizations, I needed to have a meeting every week that was focused on improving and making decisions in that important and core area. So I would have a meeting every week with my sales reps. I would have a meeting every week with my receptionist. I would have a meeting with my key development candidates, right? So and this is where they would be reporting in, and also where instead of them coming to me in the middle of the day, my receptionist, and being like, oh, we have this thing, what's going on? None of these little like got a minute meetings. I said, bring it to the meeting, bring it to the meeting, bring it to the meeting. I eliminate all those distractions. And and anytime they would come up to me and I'd be like, is this something that could be brought for the meeting? And they would learn not to bring things to me unless it was like emergency level. And so you start focusing people on like, bring it to the meeting, bring it to the meeting, bring it to the meeting. And then, and this works when you're working with any type of organization or any type of efficiency. So if you have marketers that you're working with or agencies, or if you have like, that's how they're going to work with you, is they're going to say, bring it to the next meeting. And then that's where you as the leader will be making decisions, bringing out efficiencies and challenging them to improve certain things. So looking at the numbers, I would always do that with my receptionist and be like, or what happened with these numbers? This is what's going on. We need to fix this, this, and this. Let's talk about how we can do that. This is our focus this week. Boom, 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 boom. And we'd work on something. And then what happens is over 52 weeks, you're making incremental improvements. You're not trying to solve everything, but you're making incremental improvements, 52 of them every single year. That's how you grow a business. That's how you grow exponentially over the course of a year. But a lot of times that's just not how a lot of businesses or people function. And they just get distracted a lot of times. So these meetings with really intentional, focused, key result areas, having something be responsible for that, and then having that incremental increase every week, that's a key thing for productivity.
So I think it's important to address how one can identify their key result areas. And I know that that's like an entire chat in itself, but I was hoping you could give a paragraph or two about how you found your key result areas, or a way, at least a philosophy.
That depends on your business, right?
Of course, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like identify it for everybody. I'm just saying like, what kind of questions should one ask if they're looking for their key result area in their own business?
Well, what are the things that'll put me out of business real quick if they aren't going well?
Perfect.
That's the first thing I would start with.
Put it on a quote wall.
Yeah. If you're going to be put out of business in a matter of weeks or months without these things, you're going to need to pay attention to those numbers. One of them is obviously going to be sales. But those sales could be made up of a bunch of numbers, right? It could be ad dollars. It could be efficiencies in your funnel or online marketing. It could be, engagement numbers to a certain extent. I'm guessing there might be some businesses based on engagement numbers where you're looking to get new leads, for example. There's all sorts of stuff like that. But it can also be a little less tangible if you're developing leaders or coaching people, for example. So if you're running a business where you're working with communities and coaching them and moving them forward to somewhere else, then there's probably some performance indicators that you're looking from your people that you want to hold them accountable to. And so those would be something you have to figure out. But, for example, if I were coaching people on how to be great dungeon masters, right? If they were running their games and they were consistently losing players, which means that they kept on not keeping their gaming group together, all of a sudden, that's an indicator they're probably going to quit my program because it's not working for them. So I have to look at those key performance indicators of like, how many games a month are they running, and are they running it with the same person? How effective is it going? And are they retaining people? So those might be some preliminary numbers if I was coaching someone on how to run a dungeon master business, right? So
nice.
There, you can find these things yourself. I don't think you need me necessarily to, but it'll vary on your stuff. But ask what's going to put you out of business fastest, and make sure you're paying attention to it.
Nice.
Hey Nerdpreneurs, that was part 1 of our time management discussion. Part 2 will be dropping in just a few days, and I'll be going over the 6 steps to great time management that's helped me throughout my whole life. So hit subscribe so you don't miss it. Check out the show notes for links to the article and the books that we reference in this episode. Got an idea, an article, or a question for our next Talking Nerdy discussion? You can talk to us directly at NerdpreneurPod on X, Nerdpreneur Podcast on Instagram, or email us at nerds@nerdpreneurpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep it nerdy.